Hello learners, welcome back to the course on learning and development in organization. We move to the third lecture of this module where we were looking into understand whether the learning and development initiatives, interventions that you have done in the organization, are they effective? So in that journey, we looked into different techniques, different tools, different ways to evaluate the effectiveness of this learning and development program. Today, we'll look into some of the models of evaluation. So these are some of the models which across the module I have introduced already to you. You would recollect the Kirkpatrick model, the Phillips-Harvey model, etc. Today, I would like to give a different perspective altogether with respect to these models, and I will try to go deeper into each and every model that is available for the evaluation of the effectiveness of the learning and development initiatives. I am Dr. Abraham Cyril Issac. I am an assistant professor at the School of Business, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. When we start with the theme that if you don't have data, you are just another person with an opinion. You think about this for a certain amount of time. Maybe you take 10 seconds and think about all the interactions, all the communication, all the possible discussions you have with your friends, with the officers that you are working with the co-employees, with the co-workers. You will see that anybody who is stating anything without empirical evidence, or let's say data being backing the whole hypothesis or whatever the point he or she is mentioning, if they are not backing it by data, it is just an opinion. So this is where we talk about the way or the need for actual evaluation of the learning and development model. So we try to bring in a certain level of conceptual frameworks whereby we can actually evaluate these learning and development initiatives. Let's look into that in a greater detail. So when we talk about evaluation, why we have to evaluate, we are critically stating that evaluation is a critical component of the learning and development cycle altogether. So typically, it provides a systematic process for assessing whether learning interventions have achieved their intended outcomes and contributed meaningfully to the individual and organizational performance altogether. So without evaluation, all the training efforts which you are taking risk becoming isolated events disconnected from the business goals and devoid of measurable value. So when you talk about the evaluation of learning and development programs, at the core, L&D evaluation seeks to answer typically three fundamental basic questions. And the question number one in this case is, did the training meet its objectives? So when you are coming across such a question, all the evaluation measures whether the learning goals such as knowledge acquisition or skill development or behavior change, whatever it is, be it the knowledge acquisition, be it the skill development, be it the behavior change, were they achieved by the participants? So this is classically elaborated by Kirkpatrick et al. Kirkpatrick and Kirkpatrick, to be precise, 2006. So this is a fundamental question, and the answer lies in the framework that was given by Kirkpatrick and Kirkpatrick, 2006. Now, the second important question today, when you look into L&D evaluation, is that did the training deliver value to the organization? So beyond the learner satisfaction or engagement, evaluation determines the business relevance of the intervention. So it assesses whether training translated into performance. Whether the training translated into performance, this is vital. Whether the training translated with high efficiency or it gave way to some sort of innovation. This is what is critical with respect to the second question, and this was categorically discussed by Phillips and Phillips. 2007 work. So if you have the bandwidth, please do go and read Phillips and Phillips 2007, where they answer this particular question. The third important question, or I would say the core question of L&D evaluation, which we'll discuss today, is did the training enhance individual and organizational performance? So learning should not benefit only individuals but also improve the team productivity, the customer service to be particular, employee retention and other key organizational metrics. So we'll thank the work of Holton, 1996. I'm giving this reference, so if you are interested in seeking answers to this question, these are the reference points where you have to actually understand this. So basically, learning should not only benefit individuals, but also employee retention and other key organizational metrics. Now, let's look into the strategic importance of evaluation. When we talk about the strategic importance of evaluation, please understand, evaluation is more than a summative report. It's a learning process in itself, offering insights into how future learning and development strategies can be refined and made more impactful. So, as Brinkerhoff 2006 aptly stated, evaluation is not an end in itself, but a means for continuous learning and improvement. So, this perspective emphasizes evaluation as a development tool, not just a control mechanism. So it allows organizations to actually engage in accountability, where they justify the L&D investments to stakeholders through clear evidence or results. They also look into the continuous improvement, where you identify strengths, gaps and opportunities to refine the learning strategies, and the return on investment analysis, demonstrating the financial and strategic value of training interventions. So when you talk about evaluation, we have to understand evaluation as a strategic enabler. So in today's dynamic and resource constrained environment, data-driven L&D decisions are increasingly expected. So evaluation provides the evidence base for what you can see is that aligning learning with business strategy, tailoring interventions to learner needs specifically, securing the leadership buy-in and enhancing learner motivation and relevance. So ultimately, if you ask me, evaluation helps ensure that L&D is not viewed as a cost center, but as a strategic enabler of organizational agility, capability development, and sustainable growth. So this strategic approach, that is long-term approach, this is what makes L&D all the more critical as a vertical within the stream of human resource management. Now let's look deeply into some of the significant models. We'll start with the Kirkpatrick's 4-level evaluation model. We have already touched upon this in the previous modules. We'll try to dig deeper and understand what this model actually communicates from a different angle altogether. So when we talk about the origin and overview, as you are aware, it was developed by Donald Kirkpatrick in 1959 and later refined in 1994. So the Kirkpatrick model remains one of the most widely used frameworks for evaluating training and development initiatives, period. There has been no such model that has been this popular. So that is where all the positive aspects lie in terms of the Kirkpatrick model, which we'll shortly discuss. So you look into the Kirkpatrick model, it provides a structured 4-tiered approach that moves from basic participant satisfaction to measurable organizational impact. I repeat, measurable organizational impact. So we have categorically underscored the need for measuring something in the previous 2 modules. So this is where Kirkpatrick model becomes a hit. It gives us measurable organizational impact. So training evaluation is about more than happy sheets. It must focus on what people learn, what people do, and what people actually achieve together. So this is what the classic Kirkpatrick model summed up is. Now when we look into this model, it has 4 level evaluations. So 4 levels of evaluation. Starts with reaction. Some of you would have already seen this part. When you look into the description of this, it measures how participants feel about the training experience, including the training content, the training delivery, or the relevance in itself. So something like a satisfaction survey, or something like a NPS, the Net Promoter Score, or participant feedback. These could be some of the metrics essentially that would look into the reaction aspect. The second level is learning assesses the extent to which participants gained knowledge, they improved skills, or shifted attitudes as a result of the training program. So we essentially look into the pre and post training test. We have a possibility of conducting quizzes or simulations or some certain knowledge assessments that can actually make us understand the extent to which participants gained knowledge. The third possibility, or the third level rather, in the Kirkpatrick's 4-level evaluation model is behavior. When you talk about behavior, it evaluates whether participants apply what they learned on the job. That is, the transfer of learning, dissemination of learning, whether it is essentially happening. This is what the behavior or the behavioral change is. So we can do that, understand that with the help of observations. We can conduct the 360-degree feedback. We have discussed comprehensively about it. I'm not going to spend more time on that. We can have supervisor reports. We can have performance reviews. So all these aspects typically address the third level, which is behavior. And finally, we have the fourth level, which is the results. So it measures the final impact of training on organizational goals and business outcomes. So productivity metrics, you can have the metrics like quality improvements, or sometimes the customer satisfaction, or maybe sales rate, or the error rates, or the turnover. All these aspects typically are examples of metrics that are widely adopted with respect to the results part in the Kirkpatrick model. Now let's quickly look into the strengths of the model. Please note, it is one of the most widely accepted model. The Kirkpatrick model is globally recognized and applicable across industries, and this is what makes it more stronger and more robust. So it is widely accepted, and for its benefit, it is comprehensive also. So it covers both individual and organizational outcomes. Please note, it is highly scalable. It can be applied to short workshops or large-scale development programs. That flexibility is what makes it actually widely acceptable, if you ask me. You can use this particular model even for a small workshop organizational type setting, or even large development programs. It could be with multifaceted individuals, multiple stakeholders. It can be a large program, but still it can be used. And please note, it encourages strategic thinking. That is, it promotes evaluation that aligns learning with business objectives. Now let's look into the limitations and critics. Despite its popularity, I should say, model has several limitations. First, it lacks the ROI measurement. So we have discussed the importance of ROI measurement. So when I talk about something deficient or something which lacks ROI measurement, I hope that you can acknowledge and appreciate the fact that the model does not explicitly measure cost benefit or return on investment, which limits its utility for financial justification. You can also see that there is this underuse of levels 3 and 4. If you look into many organizations, organizational situations, they stop at level 1, that is reaction, or at best they move to level 2, that is learning. So due to the complexity, due to the cost, and due to the time and investment that is required to assess behavioral change and business results, many a time we see that there is a significant underuse of level 3 and level 4. And please also do understand, it assumes a linear causality. The model suggests a linear relationship between levels, which may not always exist in dynamic or complex environments. So, sometimes there might be multiple other variables that affect the final result, or maybe there might be some extraneous variables that can create a sort of hindrance or complexity to the entire equation. There might be some issues pertaining to some factors which are yet to be disclosed. So many a time it is not the linear relationship that typically comes up, but the problem with Kirkpatrick's 4-level evaluation model is that it assumes this linear causality, and that acts as one of the important limitations of this particular model. So what are the contemporary enhancements? Modern applications of the Kirkpatrick model often recommend starting from the top down, beginning with the desired business outcomes, level 4. We have already mentioned that level 3 and level 4 are not truly appreciated, but the contemporary advancements suggest top-down approach, working backward to design and measure learning interventions accordingly. So the backward planning typically aligns L&D more tightly with the strategic goals altogether. So some of the practical application tip, if you ask me, when you are applying the Kirkpatrick model to ensure alignment between the learning objectives and business goals. That could be one of the aspects. Another could be evaluation tools and stakeholder expectations. Stakeholder expectations. The third aspect could be resources that are available for data collection and analysis. These could be some of the practical application tips that associate with the Kirkpatrick model. Now let's go into the second important model, which is the Phillips ROI model. Again, the same we have touched in the previous modules, but we'll try to go a bit deeper. The origin, as you know, Jack Phillips, 1997, came up with this Phillips ROI model. It is an extension of Kirkpatrick model. We'll just now look into how it is different from the Kirkpatrick. Level 5, that is, it brings in or adds to Kirkpatrick 5th level, which is ROI, return on investment, which talks about monetary benefits versus the cost of training. So what are the key steps involved? Isolate the effects of training, convert benefits into monetary terms, compare benefits to actual costs. So what is the ROI percentage formula? You have the training benefits minus the training costs divided by the training costs into 100. So that will give you the ROI percentage. So what is it good for? Essentially, the strengths show that it emphasizes financial accountability. It helps justify the training investments. But that said, it is also not devoid of any limitations. It is highly data intensive, so it will have all the problems that are associated with the large amount of data, and it requires assumptions and estimations for monetary conversions. So these are some of the typical limitations that are associated with Phillips ROI model. The third important model that we'll discuss today is the CIPP model, the context, input, process and product. If you look at from a different dimension altogether, the model which Daniel Stufflebeam 1971 gave was more of an educational evaluation adapted to learning and development. So this is the different perspective I want to bring in today. You look into the component in terms of context, input, process and product. You will see that in context you have the needs assessment, goal analysis, etc. Example could be what we understand today as the skills gap analysis. We have also discussed this extensively across the previous module. If you look into input, it's more of the resource and strategy evaluation. So something like a budget and vendor review would be a critical example with respect to input. Concerning the process, you have monitoring implementation, that is training delivery audits could be an example in this case. And when we talk about the product as a component, the purpose would be outcome evaluation. So example would be learner outcomes and business impact altogether. So when we talk about the CIPP model, we have to understand that it is useful for both formative and summative evaluation. It has a comprehensive and decision-oriented approach altogether. But that said, please note, the CIPP model can be time-consuming. It requires evaluator expertise. So somebody who is an OE, somebody who is just into the learning and development vertical might not be able to handle the CIPP model that effectively. The fourth model which I want to discuss today is the Brinkerhoff success case method, what we understand as SEM. So when you talk about this particular model, Robert Brinkerhoff 2003 came up with this particular model, and the key principle is focus on evaluating the success cases where training made a big difference and understand typically why it worked. So answering this is critical. So what are the steps associated with that? Identify the goals of training, identify best and the worst cases that are there with respect to the particular training scenario or the learning scenario, conduct in-depth interviews to understand what is going right and what is going wrong, analyze what worked, what didn't, and typically why. So it gives a reasoning for the why part. So this is the beauty of Brinkerhoff success case method, which gives us the answer to why. Again, if you look into the strength, it highlights typically what works in real world setting, and it offers actionable insights for future improvements. That said, it is always good for small sample, therefore it is hardly generalizable. So generalizability is always questioned because of the small sample usage. It focuses on extremes rather than average outcomes. So you look into average outcomes with a small sample, it will have its own problems to be taken up. So that is why many a time this particular model, the SEM model, gets undermined. So when we look into all these models that we discussed today, a quick comparative analysis of application will show us that what is Kirkpatrick model best for? It is best for all general, all purpose L&D evaluation. So it's a all season learning and development evaluation model. It is easy to understand and it is widely used. When you look into the Phillips ROI, definitely it's an improvement over the Kirkpatrick because it has brought the additional level, but it is best for executive level decision making. Please note about the ROI inclusion. ROI is typically good for the executive level decision making. It adds financial rigor to the entire scheme of things. Look into the CIPP model. I told it is not easy because you need expertise in actually bringing it to success. But please note, it is best for program development and continuous improvement. So best for long-term learning programs, you can always use a CIPP. For Brinkerhoff, it's more of qualitative insights. As I mentioned, it is all about the why part. It answers the why part. It is great for case-based impact analysis altogether. So when we talk about this comparative analysis of different models, we tend to understand that there are different aspects which qualify some of the models for something. So if you want to have a general understanding of the effectiveness of the learning and development, where you stand, the right way is to go for the Kirkpatrick, because that's the all season, all way you can use it for small scale, large scale, whatever be the training program, whatever be the learning initiatives, this particular Kirkpatrick model is useful. That said, if you want to add more of financial rigor to the entire scheme of things, you have to go with Phillips ROI. CIPP model is again bit difficult because you need the expertise, but for long sustained way, it is the way to go about it. So these are some of the typical evaluation models that will give us an insight into how effective the learning and development initiatives that you have taken in the organization are. Thank you for listening to me patiently. We will come up with more details of evaluating parameters in the learning and development regime. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.